Welcome to the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Jason Earle, the founder of GotMold, joining us once again. In part one, we explored how top agents tackle mold issues, especially on the buying side. Now, in part two, we're focusing on what you can do to boost your listings, enhance your brand, and demonstrate to clients that you generally care. By staying informed about mold and having the right resources, you'll show clients that you're equipped to handle any challenges that come their way. Mold doesn't have to be a scary subject. Knowledge is key. So stay tuned because this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's grow. Welcome to the Wellness Real Estate Podcast, where you'll discover a groundbreaking strategy that is transforming real estate marketing. In every episode, we focus on topics that will help you have more authentic engagements and meaningful conversations about your business. As the wellness real estate impact grows, with projections reaching $850 billion by 2027, don't miss this opportunity to revolutionize your approach, generate more leads, and increase sales, becoming the community connector you're meant to be. I'm Sheila Alston, and I'm your host. I'm also the founder of Healthy Home Media, where I help agents all over the country leverage this new trend in the industry to spark new conversations that get people to listen to you and notice your brand. So if you're tired of spinning your wheels without the consistent leads to show for it, then stay tuned. This podcast is your guide to standing out in a rapidly evolving market, guaranteed to change the way you think about real estate marketing. Okay, welcome, Jason. I'm so glad you're here again today.
So good to be here.
Yeah, if you missed the first episode, go back and check it out because Jason shared an incredible story about how he got started in the mold world, even featuring his mold sniffing dog. Plus, he offered some fantastic insights on how top producers handled mold issues. But today we're going to dive into part two, so let's jump right in. First of all, I think it's important to understand mold and its impact. So many people brush this topic under the rug because they just don't want it to be a big deal or they don't want it to derail a closing. But, in your opinion, what are the health risks of mold exposure and why should potential buyers and sellers be aware?
Well, so it's different for everybody, quite frankly.
Mhm.
So it has a lot more to do with individual susceptibility than it does with the type of mold, or even, quite frankly, with the quantities. Although, like many things, the dose does make the poison.
Mhm.
So, contrary to popular opinion, well, I should say, contrary to the opinion of people who've been through it, you know, uh, there actually are safe levels, right? Mold is a normal part of a healthy environment. Mold spores are actually hormetic stressors. They're actually good for you in small amounts. They
Mhm.
train your body how to respond to the world because we live on planet fungi. But in larger amounts, you tend to see reactions to them that fall within four categories. You've got basically allergic, which is typical upper respiratory, has hay fever-like symptoms, sinus issues and sneezing, coughing, that kind of thing. Dermal irritation, hives, those kinds of things. So allergic. Then you also have inflammatory. And, most people these days are aware that most disease actually starts with inflammation.
Mhm.
And so mold falls within that category in a strange way. It both aggravates existing inflammatory disease and it also tends to bring out latent inflammatory disease like autoimmune disease, which we now
Mhm.
have 100 on the books. So nobody knows how many of those are caused by mold, but we know that almost all of them are aggravated by it. So
Mhm.
that's a big deal. Then you also have the cases where you have toxicity, and toxicity is what most people talk about, but it's actually a much smaller percentage of the mold-related illness, but it's still important because mold does produce potent toxins. It does react on a toxic level to cells, and so it should not be ignored. In fact, mycotoxins are what everybody talks about, and believe it or not, a lot of that comes from food, but we also do have some small exposure in buildings. And then lastly, uh, it's not quite rare, but it's the least frequent, and that is fungal infections.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's mostly when people have a compromised immune system. But guess what? That's a big percentage of the population these days, So that
Mhm.
might include people that have diabetes. It's not just the HIV patients and the cancer patients and people that have had organ transplants and things like that, which you typically think of, as our population gets more and more unhealthy, unfortunately. More and more people have a compromised immune system. So allergic, inflammatory, toxicity or toxic, and infection. So it affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So that's the very long, short answer.
Yeah, no, I love it. It just brings more awareness to why, as an agent, when you're going through a home, you should pay attention to this and not just say, let's paint over it, because especially if someone has chronic issues, this could really impact their health. So you could be, a great agent by really being their defender by looking out for some of this stuff. So in your opinion, or, given your expertise, what are some signs that they can look out for when they're just doing a walkthrough so that they can maybe see if there's mold, or how can they get better at that?
Sure. Actually, before we get into the building, just a couple of other things to be aware of
Hmm.
as an agent. You want to also learn more about who's going to be there because,
Hmm.
we just talked about how mold affects you, but the people that it affects and the type of people, it's not just the people with pre-existing conditions, young children, expectant
Hmm.
moms,
Hmm.
elderly, anyone with a pre-existing condition. So in addition to looking for the signs in a building, you also want to sort of know your customer and
Hmm.
know who's going to be living in that building because that's what will allow you to dial in the sensitivity level that you should operate with when it comes to, helping them avoid major potholes and pitfalls, right? Helping
Hmm.
them
Hmm.
avoid buildings that some people may be more well equipped to deal with, right? So that's on the people side. On the building
Right.
side, what you're looking for is any sign of moisture. Mold is a moisture problem. I mean, that's the
Hmm.
bottom line, right? People think my mold is the problem. Mold is the symptom. Mold
Hmm.
is the very predictable biological byproduct of stuff getting wet and staying wet for more than a couple of days. It's that simple.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we build our buildings out of mold food these days, so it's nearly ubiquitous. So you're looking for moisture problems, and that's any sign of dampness, and that's visual signs. That's also olfactory or scent that you might pick up, odors you might pick up, and then also trying to find out as much about the building history, seeing where how the building is situated on the property, right? So site
Hmm.
selection, or if you're in new construction, but of course, if you're talking about an existing property, is the building built into a hill? That's a big red flag, right? Is it low lying where water actually runs down the hill to it? Is the foundation wall, I think, like a dam? That could be problematic. And so
Hmm.
you're going to look for any sign of moisture in the building. You're going to look for any signs of potential moisture intrusion into the building. You're going to look for maintenance issues. There actually is a fascinating research paper where they were able to, from the curb, uh, determine the essential asthma risk level of the interior of the home based upon visible red flags related to maintenance. So this is
Wow.
gutters that are overflowing, bushes touching
Hmm.
the house, algae on the outside of the siding, right? Trees overhanging too much shade,
Hmm.
windows that have missing caulk, and
Hmm.
these kinds of things. Driveways pitched into the house, sidewalks pitched in. So you're looking for anything that could lead to moisture because ultimately that's the enemy.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. And so you just identified so many things that they could be looking for. But what if this agent is on, a listing appointment and they're seeing some of these signs? I mean, they're going to want to get the listing, or do they want to get the listing? I mean, that's
You
a,
asked the question, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it depends on who your buyer is, or it depends on who
yeah.
your seller. It depends on the market you're trying to serve. See, I
Hmm.
think before we hopped on here, I was reminded of my previous career,
Hmm.
where I was a commission salesman. I was a stockbroker, right?
Hmm.
And so I relate very much to the commission-based salesperson,
Hmm.
and someone who's there to build value and to and hopefully have a consultative approach. But you can't be all things to everybody.
Hmm.
And you have to figure out why you want to be a wellness real estate professional.
Hmm.
If you're just doing it to make money, that they'll see through that, right?
Hmm.
Because you're just going to be it's just a transactional thing. If you want to build your career as a wellness real estate professional, I think you have to be willing to say no to a lot of stuff. You have to raise your standards the same way
Hmm.
you would if you want to choose a healthier lifestyle yourself, right? You're going to say no to a lot of stuff that you normally would have said yes to. And therein lies the ability for your authenticity to do part of your sales for you, because that comes through. It's a non-verbal thing. It's a resonant frequency. Not to sound woo-woo, but it's true. People like to be with people that are like them, and affluent, health-driven, wellness-aware people will pick up on these things. And so when I was dealing with a lot of realtors back when I was still doing mold dog enhanced assessments, the most successful realtors were the ones who quickly discerned whether or not this was a building that was going to suit their client's best needs. When it comes to listing, um, you know, coaching people is the key. I think letting them
Mm-hmm.
know that they have that they can get a better value if they do the necessary on their own
Mm-hmm.
clock and on their own
Mm-hmm.
nickel. Um, but you can lead a horse to water, no pun
Yeah.
intended. Um, but you can't necessarily make them do the things that need to be done. And in that case, then they can disqualify themselves. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
like a very hard line approach, but I think there's a philosophy that you have to develop around this. It has to be yours.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to sort of determining who you really want to serve and how you want to serve them.
Well, are all of these moisture issues fixable though? Like, what if it's a beautiful historic home that's just gorgeous and you do want to list it because it's in a great area, great location, and you possibly have some buyers, but you go into the basement and you smell that musty smell?
Every building's different.
Mm-hmm.
Some buildings, that odor, by the way, will remain because of the nature of the materials. And so
Mm-hmm.
odors can embed themselves in porous materials. So it just depends on the situation. There's no hard and
Mm-hmm.
fast answer for that. But the but I have after being in thousands and thousands of homes, I have only said this house is not habitable and it
Mm-hmm.
can't be saved
Mm-hmm.
twice.
Okay.
Right. So there's always a way. Now, of course, it's time and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
You throw enough time and money at most things, you can solve a lot of them. But when it comes down to old homes, believe it or not, they tend to be, believe it or not, more easily um, cleaned. The moisture problems tend not to manifest as big mold problems because the materials
Mm.
don't support fungal growth. Modern buildings since like 1945 support fungal growth much better than the old plaster brick lath buildings.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so it's a matter of how it's built,
Mm-hmm.
and so you tend to be able to get away with believe it or not, less expensive, less demolition, less expensive remediation with less demolition. And so if it's
In a
got
home
mold
that
on.
doesn't have drywall? Is that
That's
what
right.
you're,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So plaster is great because mold actually doesn't like it won't grow on plaster. It'll grow in the paint. It'll grow in the dust inside the wall cavities. But not to any significant degree.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's no insulation in most of the old buildings if they
Mm-hmm.
haven't been renovated, and so there's not a trap. There's not fluffy stuff in there holding the moisture. So there's a lot of counterintuitive stuff when it comes to this. I think the most important thing that you can tell people, whether whether you get the listing or not, giving people the coaching they need to understand that moisture is the issue. They need to get that fixed immediately. If they
Mm-hmm.
fix the moisture problem, the problem will stop. It won't go away,
Mm-hmm.
but it will stop getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means fixing leaks. Sometimes that means dehumidifying. Sometimes it means both.
Right. Well, there is an advantage, I would say, as a listing agent, if you were able to convince the seller to be able to have this documentation, or maybe if they have maintained their house well, do you recommend that they just take good records and show that, or is there always an advantage to getting some sort of certification or getting an inspection?
That's a great question. There's no such thing as a mold certification that's worth anything. So don't go buying into that. Okay.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there aren't people selling it. So, to certify a property mold free well, let's just say conditions change so quickly that
Mm-hmm.
you could walk out the door and have a spill or a leak. I mean, can happen, and then 24
Mm-hmm.
hours later, you're there again.
Mm-hmm.
So it can happen that quickly. So my experience is that if you proactively address all known moisture problems, clean up all known resulting mold problems, document that with either a contractor's attestation that it's been cleared, um, or lab results of your own, ideally a
Mm-hmm.
combination thereof,
Mm-hmm.
that will usually suffice. And that also answers most of the disclosure laws that are on the
Mm-hmm.
books in the states that which require them.
Right. Well, so then what are some, just given all the remediations that you've been a part of, what are some common mistakes that sellers make, regarding mold that maybe could delay or complicate the sale?
Well, I would say that the biggest mistake is not having an inspector involved,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because remediators are paid by the pound, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
They're paid by the size of the project. And
Mm.
an inspector's job is to come in and an independent inspector, right? One that is not in the pockets of your agent or your, quite frankly, and the remediation contractors and everyone else, right? So there's an ecosystem here that ideally has some boundaries between those professionals so that there's some objectivity. And so
Hmm.
a qualified inspector who does their charge will come in, identify the areas of concern, delineate where it begins and where it ends, figure out what the surgical sort of removal area is, and then what needs to be cleaned. And that's done through a combination of physical assessments and then testing of the air and surfaces. That same thing should be done after the remediation is done to document the delta or the change that's occurred. So you can see it before and after. It's kind of like bookends for the
Hmm.
project. And in the middle, there's a remediation scope or an invoice, paid invoice. That's your package, right?
Hmm.
That's what you hand over. Yes, we have a confirmed mold problem that was beyond hygiene, which is basically how most of the disclosure laws work. If it's beyond like the mold on your grout, I had a significant mold problem of significance, and here's the inspection report, here's the remediation invoice paid, and here's the post remediation testing. If you skip over that, there's a bunch of things that can happen. First of all, you can get taken to the cleaners by the remediator. Second of
Hmm.
all, if you don't have documentation that you actually did the testing at the end, it's he said, she said, right? This is a
Right.
microscopic organism. You need to verify it with microscopic analysis.
Hmm.
And so having that data is critical. And also, quite frankly, not having an inspector or what they call an IEP, which is a independent environmental professional.
Oh,
What you end
uh-huh.
up, yeah, what you end up with is a lot of non-standard practices being
Hmm.
followed. What that means is you're going to have some remediators coming in and they're going to spray stuff. They're going to fog the building. They're going
Hmm.
to, who knows what they're going to do, but they're not following the industry standard, which is the IICRCS 520. And it's important to work with contractors that are certified by IICRC, but also to make sure that they are agreeing to adhere to that standard, which also outlines the importance of having an inspector and a remediator that are distinctly separate in their roles and have no financial ties.
Yeah, so are they testing for just mold in the air, or are they swiping things down? And you brought up a good point. Like, what if it's just mold in the caulking somewhere and they don't have a moisture problem? Is this something, do they have to get an inspector for that kind of thing too? Or I know I've just asked a bunch of questions.
Yeah, so the testing is a combination of air and surface tests.
Okay.
However, there are surface tests. One of them is called ERMI, that's always high. And so if you see this in a real estate transaction, you're going to be chasing some ghosts.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it's almost impossible to get a good ERMI score. So it's a very popular test within the functional healthcare community, and
Hmm.
honestly, I think it's because it drives a lot of protocols.
Hmm.
Um, but it's very problematic. And so those wipe tests, those surface tests, are usually not the best way to go about assessment or post remediation. Um, Air tests are really helpful for post remediation. They can also be helpful for diagnostics, and that's using something called spore traps, these little
Hmm.
cassettes right here, for example.
Hmm.
Um, we happen to sell a test kit that uses those.
Hmm.
So we really believe in that method. But a good inspector is going to look at that mold on the grout, for example. It's a great example, and say, is this mold on the grout, or is that grout actually compromised? Is water getting behind there and potentially causing a mold problem in that wall? Big difference.
Mm.
Mold on grout versus missing grout. Actually, I'm more concerned, and I say this all the time. I'm more
Hmm.
concerned about missing grout than I am moldy grout. Uh,
Really?
yeah, because mold and grout won't become airborne. It's not really a health hazard. It's minor in the size and scope of it. It doesn't have any nutrition to support any significant colonization, so it doesn't produce the the toxins that make mold famous. So it's just an aesthetic thing. But
Okay.
mold behind a wall is not an aesthetic thing. You won't even
Right.
see it, but it can be a major health hazard.
Right. So, but if someone has moldy grout, what is your recommendation on getting rid of that? I mean, bleach is not supposed to be good for your health, and I know that it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily get rid of the mold in the first place. So, what do you recommend?
Might be the only place the bleach is actually advisable.
Oh,
Believe it or not, yeah. So the idea with bleach is that people use it, especially on like porous things, for example,
Mm-hmm.
sheetrock.
Mm-hmm.
And bleach is mostly water. It's 97% water, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
And we've, already addressed the fact that mold is a moisture problem. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you put bleach on mold, the bleach part, the sodium hypochlorite, which is actually what makes bleach, that evaporates pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so hence you can smell it. It'll bleach the surface, it makes it look clean, but it leaves behind all this dead fungal matter. And
Mm-hmm.
then the water and then the bleach evaporates, leaving behind extra moisture. So you've just added
Mm-hmm.
moisture to a moisture problem,
Right.
and that's why it's so counterproductive to use bleach. But when you're dealing with something that's got a very limited surface area like
Mm-hmm.
grout,
Mm-hmm.
where there's no nutrition to support a lot of growth, and you're basically bleaching it to clean it, bleaching
Mm-hmm.
it, and then you're gonna treat it again. You can use the bleach pens, to do grout if you want. Some people will
Mm-hmm.
remove the grout altogether, wear a mask for that, and ventilate, but mostly for the dust, but also because there's fungi in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then replace it. But here's the key: when you replace grout, or if you bleach the grout, there are grout sealants. And this is what prevents it from getting moldy again, because mold is not actually growing on the grout; it's growing on the soap scum and the debris that gets stuck in the little pores of the grout. So if you
Oh.
seal it, then that stuff doesn't happen again.
How often should homeowners do that?
Well, they should have sealed it when it was first installed, which is
Mm-hmm.
where most of these things fail. Same, and also caulk, by the way, is also something. It's caulk and grout.
Mm-hmm.
And again, these are aesthetics, but they're the things that people see, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
the things that people sort of focus on, especially if they're looking at a home and they don't really know what they're looking at. They'll look at the hygiene of a bathroom, and the grout tends to be, a focal point for whatever reason. It's just so how often should they do it? As soon, first of all, it should be sealed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And then, every time it's renovated or repaired, you should seal it again. And then if you do end up with compromised grout and you have to clean it, then you just seal it again. So it's just on an as needed basis. And if you see any missing, if you see it break off or fall off, that's key. The most important thing is don't let grout or caulk be missing. That's also that's at the what they call the cove, where the
Right.
wall meets the tub, but then also where the tub meets the floor. I've
Right.
seen floors just rot out. I've seen tubs go through the floor because water had gotten behind all of that and rotted out the structure.
Wow. So true. So just maybe every year when you're doing your home maintenance, just check for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just keep your eyes peeled for it, and if you see stuff accumulating in there, you may give it a little touch up and then seal it.
So if someone does have an inspection and they say, yeah, you need some mold remediation in the laundry room or in the bathroom or something, I know that there's probably a giant range, but what can people expect remediation costs to be?
It
I
depends on where you
mean,
live in the country. It depends on
yeah.
how big the project is. It
Mm-hmm.
depends on whether or not they are. They're basically two kinds of remediators. There are ones that work for insurance companies, and what I mean by that is that they do insurance work.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing water damage, sewage backups, a lot of commercial stuff, drying, dehumidifying, mucking and gutting.
Mm-hmm.
This is the low cost, low quality, oftentimes without any testing done before or
Mm-hmm.
after. This is getting
Mm-hmm.
in and getting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you've got the other side of the spectrum, which are what they sometimes call Q-tip remediators.
Mm-hmm.
This is equally problematic because they tend to be very expensive, and they tend to be catering to an affluent audience that's being cared for by a functional provider. They oftentimes have, Lyme disease and mold and all these other things that are going
Mm-hmm.
through. So that's the other extreme. Um, that those remediators can be $100,000 for a house, and the guys on the other side can be 1,500.
Right. Right. So
So
there's a big
it's a
range.
huge delta. On
Yeah.
average, $5,000 to $10,000 is the national average
Mm-hmm.
range for remediation. But the key is defining remediation. The root word
Mm-hmm.
is remedy, which means fix the moisture problem. That has to be done. If you don't fix the moisture problem, if you don't identify the moisture problem and fix it, that's not remediation. And then you have to remove the mold. You cannot spray or treat in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're getting quotes, regardless of the price, and the moisture problem is not front and center as the focal point, and then they're not telling you that they're going to remove this stuff carefully with containment and negative air pressure, they're not a
Mm-hmm.
remediator.
Mm.
Um,
Do you have specific questions, or just, I guess you just identified some of the things to look for to know that it's going to be a good remediator? But what are some other signs that
well,
they're?
well, I can give you a link to, and in fact, I'll do that so you can put it in the show notes
Mm-hmm.
on how to hire a mold remediation contractor,
Oh, okay, great.
and that will help a lot. So asking them what standards they follow, and you want to ask if they use chemicals. Sometimes I encourage people to ask a trick question, which is what chemicals do you use?
Mm-hmm.
And if they answer with any,
Mm-hmm.
they failed because there are no chemicals to be used during mold remediation.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, it's a hugely common, a pervasively common misconception that you need to kill the stuff. There is no need to kill mold.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you have to like sneak up behind it and snuff it out before you remove it from the house. Like
Uh-huh.
it's
Uh-huh.
it's not like that. You just cut
Cut
it,
it out.
bag it, and remove it. Yeah, and then you've made dust. When you do that, you clean that dust up. You're cleaning up all the extra spores and stuff that have broken free. So remediation is essentially setting up environmental controls to contain the dust that you make during the work, so that you protect the occupants and also the people that are working in the space. So it's preparation, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's controlled demolition. You're cutting out the materials that can't be cleaned, like sheetrock and insulation and
Mm-hmm.
carpet padding and stuff like that. Carpet, and then you're going to clean all the air and surfaces within the space, and then in many cases just outside the remediation area as a fail-safe. But in no remediation guidance documents that ever existed, that were based on best practices, is killing mold part of it. It's not part of it. It's just not. But it is pervasively used in remediation done by contractors who are taking shortcuts. It's very inexpensive to use chemicals and fogs and
Mm-hmm.
stuff instead of cleaning, but it's
Mm-hmm.
totally ineffective.
Yeah, and it just introduces more toxins to someone who's already probably compromised. That's not a good
That's right.
idea.
And by the way, it's a lot easier to get the mold out of your house than it is those toxins. Once they're in, a
Yeah.
lot of those remediation chemicals leave behind residues, some of which are endocrine disruptors, hormone
Mm-hmm.
modulators, carcinogens, not to mention the fact that we need a healthy microbiome in our building, which means that just like we need microbes in our gut, right, to do most of the dirty work, to digest our
Mm-hmm.
food and make B vitamins and make neurotransmitters and all that stuff. We have similar dynamics on our skin. You are
Mm-hmm.
covered with a sheath of microbes. Our microbiome on our built in us, on us, and around us is the hallmark of health.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity, biological diversity, is directly correlated with health. That's both in our bodies and in our buildings.
That's amazing. So that's probably why, as you were saying, that the swipe test gets more microbes on it, just because we already have them in our buildings, as compared to, you were telling me about the air system that you have measures the outside and the inside so that you can tell the difference.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing that you want to watch out for if you're in the business, or if you're in the market for remediation, is watching out for these people that sell that mold is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It is true that mold growth indoors is bad news, but mold itself is benign. It's
Mm-hmm.
not out to hurt you, and you're going to find it on every surface, not mold growth,
Mm-hmm.
mold spores. They're on
Okay.
every surface of your house. They're on your eyeglasses. They're on the face of your watch. They're in every breath you take. So just just grabbing surface samples here and there, and then interpreting the data as this thing where, oh, look at that mold's here.
Mm.
Congratulations. You just confirmed that mold is ubiquitous. You did not confirm that there's a mold problem.
But what's the difference between a regular mold spore and, like, black mold is supposed to be so terrible for you?
That's another great common misconception. And I'll give you an article that I wrote about the myth of black mold too.
Mm.
Molds come in lots of different colors. Some of them are, in fact, colorless. And so many of the black molds are non-toxigenic. And there are several toxigenic species that are not black.
Mm.
And so there was this is a classic sort of pop culture media oversimplification that kind of gets
Mm-hmm.
hijacked, and you know And so this happened. I won't go into the whole story, but there was a woman who named Melinda Ballard who sued her insurance company because of negligence and bad faith. They mishandled the claim, and she ended up with a $34 million settlement, and
Mm-hmm.
it's what led to the mold is gold thing. But she
Mm-hmm.
really pounded the whole black mold, toxic mold drum so loudly that it got beaten into our culture. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the fact is that the molds that people are talking about when they talk about black mold are late stage colonizers. What that
Mm-hmm.
means is that they you have to have a moisture problem for a while for
Mm-hmm.
them to pop up. So those species, while toxin producing, indeed, are more of an indication of a long-term chronic water problem, which is in and of itself a health hazard
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the species of mold that's present, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at them as an indicator of an issue, and it's never a surprise to me that people are sick when they live in buildings that have that present, but I don't blame that particular species. I look at that species as, oh, of course that's growing there because
Mm-hmm.
that problem's been there for a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
so buildings where those types of molds are growing, um, generally have occupants that are experiencing health issues,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily on a causative basis. So if you took that one species out, they would probably still be having issues because there are other microbes at work there
Right.
that are not black. In fact, some of them are not even mold. There are bacteria that grow alongside of these that produce toxins too. So what we're looking
Oh.
at again, I always want to bring it back to the bottom line, which is that a mold problem is a moisture problem. When we start
Mm-hmm.
getting into looking at the species and saying, well, I want this one, but not this one,
Right.
you don't get to make that choice. And
Right.
and when you have a moisture problem of any significance, it is the health hazard. The molds are just sort of the cast of characters that flow through that story.
Oh, that's amazing. So if you're an agent out there, I mean, do you have advice on any agents? Like, how should they work with mold specialists? Should they just learn who the great ones are in their area? Or how do you, what's your advice on how an agent can work well with a mold specialist in their area?
My feeling is that I've always kind of struggled with the fact that mold guys are brought in after
Mm-hmm.
there's all these issues found.
Mm-hmm.
The home inspector's already come through, and usually the home inspector flags the stuff and send or suggests the mold guy comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of money and time has been spent at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And this 11th hour,
Mm-hmm.
my feeling has always been, and I've done this very successfully with I don't know, less than 100 clients over the years,
Mm-hmm.
but getting in there first, getting a
Mm-hmm.
mold, because a building's number one enemy is moisture.
Mm-hmm.
It's an enemy for the longevity of the structure. It's also an enemy for the health of the occupants. And so if you can get a building that doesn't have any moisture problems, if you can get that straightened out first, then bring in the home inspector and check out the outlets and the appliances and all that other stuff. That stuff is secondary, in my opinion. The first thing is, does the building shed wind and water well? And if
Mm-hmm.
the building sheds wind and water well, then it qualifies for the next step. But the process is backwards, in my opinion. However, mold guys are more expensive than
Mm-hmm.
home inspectors, right? So my suggestion is developing relationships with not just mold specialists. Lately, I prefer that non that people that are not skilled and experienced with mold issues um, turn to building biologists um, more so than mold guys. Mold guys tend to be more opportunistic, candidly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They tend to be one-trick ponies. If you ask them, they have no education in the space. If you ask them, usually they were a contractor, or who knows, maybe they were flipping pizzas, they were flipping burgers, making pizza, 6 months before. So, it's a career path which unfortunately attracts a lot of people that shouldn't be in it. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
building biologists have to jump through some hoops. They actually have
Mm-hmm.
to get educated. They dedicate at least a year of their life to getting an education that's broader than mold. And in that study, they're learning about the other aspects of buildings that can also be problematic. And I just think that you tend to get a higher quality professional that way,
Mm-hmm.
that's got a more holistic view,
Mm-hmm.
WHOLE, but also dovetails better
Mm-hmm.
with a wellness real estate professional in the first place. And they also tend not to be remediators.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have their hand in that cookie jar. They really
Mm-hmm.
do, I think, generally respect their position in this space as an objective, unbiased voice. Um, and um, and unfortunately, there are only, it's a small, you have a small list to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
But they are distributed around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would cozy up to your local building biologist, and try to get them into those houses earlier, or sooner rather than later.
Right. Well, because what I'm hearing from you is that a mold specialist didn't necessarily need to go through any training to deem themselves as a mold specialist.
The training is, well, before there was an industry standard, there
Mm-hmm.
were these, to say diploma mill is giving it too much credence. More like, certification mills
Mm-hmm.
where you could, some of them didn't even have to take a test,
Mm-hmm.
register. I mean, not even worth the paper it's printed on. And then the standards popped up, and then there was an organization that was doing some good training, IAQA, and their credentials meant something, and then that kind of went away. They had
Mm-hmm.
some industry problems, and there's been a couple of groups that have popped up in their space that aren't holding the bar where it was, and then more recently there are now I think 5 states that have licensing requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was lower the bar, actually. Now you
Mm-hmm.
can get a license in those states with, a 50 question open book exam after sitting
Mm-hmm.
in a class for 3 days. And there's no field requirements, there's no prerequisites, there's no internship, there's no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So the mold industry in general, is has devolved. Candidly, it was already
Mm-hmm.
in bad shape, but I think the bar has been lowered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason why I'm so focused on being behind the microphone here,
Mm-hmm.
to raise awareness around this, because it is in many ways caveat emptor, it's buyer beware. You have to really, choose your professionals carefully, and really, be willing to ask hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a weird feeling, believe it.
Well, and I feel like because of the money factor, it seems like luxury homes are the ones that, you can, I mean, that they have the ability to get rid of the mold or whatever. But I remember us talking and you were just saying it's not a luxury consideration, it's a necessity for everybody. And so how can that be more accessible to everyone? Just I guess maintenance, right? Because that doesn't need to cost that much, or it's much better to take care of a problem in the beginning instead of waiting it till it's a big problem, right?
Right, but that is not the American way.
Yeah.
Right. So we are reactive, and we oftentimes front load low cost, and
Hmm.
then the back end is where we get hurt. So this is a
Hmm.
great example. We build buildings out of sheetrock. It's fast and
Hmm.
cheap,
Hmm.
but the repairs and the remediation are really expensive
Hmm.
because you've got wall assemblies and layers, and there's lots of. Whereas if you built the building in the first place the right way, out of
Hmm.
something that doesn't have a wall cavity, more expensive up front. But guess what? Remediation doesn't exist, and if you do have to remediate,
Hmm.
it's surface cleaning, and it's literally just
Hmm.
something that you could do yourself in most cases, or you can go rent a little bit of equipment if you felt inspired to do so. So yeah, the big houses tend to also have problems because a lot of those spaces tend to be out of sight, out of mind, by the way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, there are a lot of famous cases of high profile people like Michael Jordan and Ed McMahon, and, guys who had big mold problems. And, you read the lawsuits, and you'll see it was in the wing, that the
Yeah.
west wing, or the north wing of the house,
We never
where
used
no one
it.
had been in, who knows how
10
long.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the size of the house actually does unfortunately correlate somewhat to maintenance issues, because the bigger
Hmm.
the house, the harder it is to maintain.
Hmm.
But small houses, yes, indeed. Theoretically, it should be less expensive to remediate. Certainly, maintenance is the issue. But keep in mind that mold also is directly tied to a lot of psychiatric issues, right? So,
Hmm.
mold and dampness indoors is directly correlated, according to a Big Brown University study that was done in 2008. And 6,000 people were queried about their conditions in their home and their mental health, and they found
Hmm.
a very strong correlation. So when you start talking about a moisture problem turning into a mold problem, and then deferred maintenance, and then the compounding of that, and then next thing you know, that starts affecting the cognition and the mental health of the occupants. And oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
that actually causes them to not leave the building. They get so depressed, and then they don't leave, and then the building makes them sicker, and so the
Mm-hmm.
maintenance gets deferred further. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
real negative loop that gets stuck, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of listing agents will run into, is that
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of that gray garden syndrome, right? Where the people have
Mm-hmm.
like lived there for so long, and you're like, how do you get? They're stuck there, and you want to help them
Mm-hmm.
get out, and they need to get out, but how do you? And so this is where you have to figure out whether or not you want to go the distance and help coach them through that process. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, yeah, if you can get prevention in there, great. But most of the time, by the time you're talking about it, it's already too late.
Yeah, I remember last time we talked, you had all of these statistics, and I'm trying to remember what they were for, but do you do you remember what all those statistics were that we were talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So there's a couple of really important numbers that I think people
okay.
should be aware of. First of all, 47% of homes have a mold or moisture problem of significance, according to Lawrence Berkeley Labs.
Mm,
And they looked at, that was actually a meta study. So they looked at a whole bunch of different studies, and then they drew a line sort of down the middle. And the numbers were much higher in commercial buildings. So it's a pervasive issue.
mhm,
About 114 million households, roughly, in the country, and about 75% of those are sheetrock based.
mm,
So of course, buildings that get wet and stay wet for more than 24 hours, 48 hours really, uh, can develop a mold problem. So what we have is sort of this humongous opportunity for mold to just continue to occur and recur.
mhm,
And then within the population that lives in those buildings, you've got these huge numbers of people that are severely affected by this. You got 25 million asthmatics in the United States,
mhm,
of which 10
mhm,
million are kids. And that number's up 100% in the last 10 years. And according to EPA Berkeley Labs, 25% of those cases are mold and dampness related.
mm.
And then you got 37 million Americans with chronic sinusitis. That's 11% of the population. And according to Mayo Clinic, 97% of those cases are mold and dampness related.
Wow,
So those are
wow.
just two respiratory illnesses. You
Hmm.
start the mold and depression thing is a big deal.
Hmm.
And how many people are depressed in the United States? Who knows? A lot more than are
Right.
admitting to it. And especially right now, I mean, we all know it's election day right now, so who
Yeah.
knows? There's going to be probably half the people are going to be depressed afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, but jokes aside, it is the impact is massive,
Hmm.
and it is and unfortunately it's only growing by the day because we spend more and more time indoors, and now post COVID often in the same building now.
Hmm. I mean, the good news is with all of this chronic illness, I mean, you see the medical industry changing. There's so much more functional, there's energy medicine coming, and there's just so much more new stuff that's coming out because of this. And so, I mean, I do think that that's why wellness real estate is now a thing. So I'm interested in learning all the stuff that you're doing and how do you see the future of real estate development evolving?
Well, I am working on two parallel paths
Hmm.
to hopefully provide resources for the real estate industry as it sort of grows into the space that I think you envision,
Hmm.
and that I envision. And so we're working on tests both for the buildings and for the body to hopefully detect this more accurately,
Hmm.
um, quicker, and less expensively.
Hmm.
So both, for air surfaces, we're also working on some sensors. So ultimately, just trying to get to the problem before it gets to you.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a push that's happening not just from my vantage point, but I think there are a lot of very smart minds working in that direction. So I'm excited about that. But we still build buildings out of paper mache, and so self-composting buildings, if you will, just add water. And
Hmm.
so that in and of itself is a major problem. And I think that there's also a major push towards better materials, which is
Hmm.
very exciting to me because if I do my work well, I make myself obsolete on that side of things. And so, how many times are we going to build in flood zones with sheetrock and
Hmm.
popsicle sticks?
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
many times are you going to rebuild in Florida or Puerto Rico or anywhere where we just continually have these extreme uh, climate events. So what you're starting to see is that people are saying, wait a second, like let's build to
Right.
last. We didn't have this problem before. And it's not
Right.
just
Didn't they
weather.
read the Three Little Pigs?
Right. Even the dumbest of three little
What?
pigs
Yeah,
didn't build
exactly.
this house out of paper. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
No, it
gosh.
so we're working with some really fun materials. In fact, I happen to have a little piece of it here. Little for anyone who's looking
Mm-hmm.
or watching. This is a material called aerated autoclave concrete. And
Mm.
I hopefully you can zoom in a little on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So see
that's
the
awesome.
pores in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like foam. It's concrete foam. I mean, it's hard. It's 1/6 the weight of concrete. And they make it with a little bit of aluminum powder, and it makes these really cool building blocks
Does
that
it
are
feel like
actually,
that hummus a little
yeah, it
bit?
feels a lot like
Yeah.
pumice. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, that's a great way to describe it. I never thought of that, but it's obvious. It is basically
Yeah.
like cast pumice, and you can make it any shape you want. And it is very strong, compressive strength, tensile strength, and believe it or not, it's slightly flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got this really cool graphene additive mixture that we're using for stucco and for mortar
So
and for
instead of the wood framing and instead of the drywall, you're doing
yes.
that instead.
That's right. So
Wow.
we've got a development going up in Austin, 32
Mm-hmm.
homes called Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're building all of them with this. And so this is the wood, it's the
Mm-hmm.
insulation, it's
Wow.
the siding, it's also the wallboard inside.
So
So
how could
there's
that
no
be more
sheetrock.
expensive? It sounds like it wouldn't be more expensive if it's,
It's not. It's the same
oh,
price. Yeah. If
wow.
you value engineer it, so there's a
Yeah.
combination of things that you say. You save money on the material. First of all, it's one supplier, which is
Yeah.
right. So that just the whole supply chain thing simplifies. You also, depending upon where you are, like down in Texas, we're getting it right out of Mexico on the rail line. So
Mm-hmm.
the shipping's inexpensive too. One contractor does all that work. So you don't have to have a framing contractor, an installation contractor, a siding guy, the drywall guy, all, and then you have to coordinate between them, right? And so all of that's time, that's money.
What about
And
the steel beams and the heavy, headers and window headers and things like that? That's not out of wood either. That's all out of that.
yeah, they'll put rebar in to into this. So they make headers, and they put rebar
So
into
the
the
whole
wall.
process of just like normally how you see the foundation laid out, that's basically what they're doing for the framing. What about remodeling? What if someone wants to remodel this house someday and they've got this material in the
You can cut it
walls?
with a handsaw. It's amazing
Really?
stuff. Yeah, no, you can drill into it with a non-carbide bit. This is amazing stuff.
Yeah.
It's a little bit brittle, so you can chip it, and that's why we're using that graphene
Mm-hmm.
mixture because it
Mm-hmm.
makes it super strong. So the block itself, we kind of wrap it in this graphene,
Mm-hmm.
uh, almost like well, stucco, drywall, compound, and mortar. So you can give it the exterior rigidity and strength, but get all those other attributes. And so, by the way, this material seems like, so this just celebrated its 100th year this year.
Oh,
It's
wow.
an old it's an old tech that is new to the United States. The
Mm-hmm.
graphene stuff I'm talking about is patent pending. That's very new, but we're
Mm-hmm.
combining the two.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also really really quiet. The houses you get into them, and the temperature is very consistent through the house.
Mm.
It has a different vibe. You can't hear the outside as much, and even from room to room, it's much
Mm-hmm.
softer. And so it's just a superior material. And also when there's extreme temperatures outside, like if you take a blowtorch on this side, you won't even be able to detect heat on this side.
Really?
Yeah, on an
So
eight
is
inch
it a
block.
3D printing technology? Like the 3D printer has to come around and do it, or how do
No, this is
you?
just blocks and panels, this stuff
Oh,
you can put the graphene into the 3D printed material. And
mm-hmm,
so we're
mm-hmm,
also talking to some groups about that, and we're putting it
mm,
into their concrete ink. They
yeah,
still call it ink, which is kind of funny.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, no. So what we're seeing is that there is a large and growing appetite for buildings built differently,
mm-hmm,
and these things often have to require often require early adopters to sort of
mm-hmm,
fund the very expensive stuff, but the
mm-hmm,
costs have come down anyway. So it's
mm-hmm.
no longer out of reach. The biggest obstacle is finding contractors that are willing and able to do this, and
Willing and
so
able to learn something new and try something new, and having a client that wants the new to try something new. I mean, we're
that's
building a
it.
house right now, and I mean, it's not that, but but Yeah, luckily I'm in San Diego, so I don't think that there's a lot of moisture issues, but
Well, let's talk. And maybe I don't know how far along you are, but
well,
uh,
we've already got the framing and everything. The windows are going to go up and the roof is going to go up next, but it's
well,
exciting to see something come together, but
let's talk about that for a second. If you haven't bought
hmm
sheetrock, okay, for
hmm
example, here's a
hmm
great, um, there are a bunch of materials to choose. One of them
hmm
is a paperless wallboard made by Den's Armor Plus. This has got
hmm
fiberglass on either side instead of paper, so it doesn't support fungal growth.
What's it
It's
called?
Den's Armor Plus.
Oh,
And so this is the advice for anyone who's going through a renovation
uh-huh.
or new construction. Choose materials that don't support fungal growth. Now you can't always do AAC, which is what this concrete stuff is.
hmm
You can't always do, you can't always choose or access these materials or the contractors to put them in. But you can choose paperless wallboard. You can also
hmm
choose things that are like no VOC paints, so
hmm
paints that don't have chemicals in them that off gas. You can also
hmm
choose fiberglass insulation if you're going to use fiberglass that doesn't have formaldehyde in it. It's formaldehyde
hmm
free. You can also choose recycled fibers like blue
hmm
jeans, believe it or not, recycled blue jeans
And
with
wool. I've heard of wool
and
insulation
wool.
too.
And there's also something called rock wool, which is a mineral wool, and that is really good stuff.
Mm.
It's expensive. It's like 2x fiberglass last I looked,
hmm
but it is very, very good. Moisture beads up on it,
hmm
It's just really good stuff. The other kind of wallboard that's really gaining some traction now, and we're using it in all of our concrete houses. Oh, by the way, I'm also consulting on a project for the Department of Defense in the Marshall Islands. We're building an experimental house down there to
Mm.
withstand corrosion and mold and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
in addition to this AAC, we're also putting in what they call magnesium board. And that
Oh.
magnesium board is exactly what it sounds like. It's made of magnesium oxide. It looks a lot like cement board, but
hmm
it's about half the weight.
hmm
And you can put it up just like sheetrock. Takes a little bit of, you have to use special screws because it
hmm
reacts and things like that. But again, if you get this stuff is all available online, and magnesium board now is readily available in most markets. Green builder supplies for this kind of stuff are an absolute godsend. They're very
Yeah.
passionate people there that will walk you through that and help you navigate the nuances of these
Do you know
materials.
Andy Pace?
I do. Yes.
Oh,
In fact,
good.
you
Yeah.
introduced me.
Oh, yeah. Good. Good. I was gonna say I need to introduce you.
Yep,
That's amazing.
absolutely.
Um, wow. Okay, so you would use magnesium like when they put the tile on the wall, they'll use that concrete board and instead of drywall.
Yeah,
So you
and I
would
like
use
that.
concrete board's good.
For bathrooms, the contractors have finally gotten used to doing that instead of green board, so I don't
Yeah.
like to tell them to do anything different.
Yeah.
Contractors are very reluctant to try anything new.
Well,
Um,
because they know that they've tried it and they don't want to just screw up, especially if they're going to be the one that's you know, guaranteeing the home. I guess if anything problem comes at the when you move in, you're going to call them. So they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to try anything new. But um, this is kind
yes,
of exciting. So is Den's Armor Plus a lot more expensive than paper or the regular sheetrock?
it used to be like 2x. I haven't priced it lately. The
Mm.
biggest issue is that it's kind of hard to find sometimes.
Oh,
So you tend to I call Georgia Pacific
uh-huh.
when necessary, and they'll sometimes help me sort of find out where it's available in our market.
Uh-huh.
I haven't had to buy any recently. I renovated a farmhouse many moons ago and did the whole thing
hmm
in it.
Oh,
And so yeah, but my point is that don't just take the builder's grade materials with
yeah,
anything these days, right?
yeah,
Nothing. I
yeah.
mean, just like, most people that are in wellness know they're not going to go just eat whatever someone puts in front of them, right? It's the
Right.
same thing with building materials. Think of our building material companies as what they are, chemical
hmm
companies.
hmm
They're chemical companies. Um, and they have no obligation to provide safe stuff because our laws don't require that. So
Right.
you have to be the advocate, just like with your health, just like
hmm
with, the doctors you choose for you and your family. You have to choose very carefully the building materials that get put into your home because you breathe 20,000 times a day, right?
Yeah.
And every breath you take is meaningful. And actually, what's crazy is that you breathe 30 pounds of air a day. So get
Wow.
your mind around that. That's more
Yeah.
food and water than you drink by a multiple. And it's the equivalent of 2,000 gallons, which is enough to fill a swimming pool. This is a big deal, and it's the thing that you do the most that you think the least about. So
Hmm.
do the stuff that's necessary so that you don't have to think about it anymore.
Well,
You know,
and you compound that with we're not going outside as much. So we're spreading all that, breathing all that air inside. So the quality of your air is so important.
it's crucial.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads me to your summit and your ongoing information because if people want to learn more, I know you have a whole bunch of great resources and things people can take advantage of.
Absolutely. I would highly recommend that anyone that's curious about this go to gotmoldsummit.com and sign up there. You get access to 33, I think 34 interviews,
Hmm.
as well as notes and a bunch of free gifts from the speakers and all sorts of really good stuff. We put together the most robust group of experts ever in this space. And what's really unique about it is that almost none of them have anything to sell. I'm talking about researchers,
Hmm.
academics,
Hmm.
people that don't talk to consumers. In fact, many of them were very camera shy. Because they'd never done it before.
Yeah.
They'd never been interviewed for a summit or for a
Yeah.
for a podcast. So it was actually adorable. But the thing is that they there's a consensus amongst
Hmm.
them that is in direct conflict with the way things are done by a lot of the people in the industry. And so
Hmm.
that's why I put those people sort of in the room together, if you will, so that people who are really concerned about this and want to dive in, you can dive in as deep as you want. I got 45 hours for the content there. And then there's also a lot of, we've got good summaries and notes. And so, you can navigate the content well, and it's broken up into 8 different themes. So gotmoldsummit.com is a great place for people to dive in if you want to dive in the deep end. You don't have to dive in the deep end. There is a shallow
Well, and
side
I
to it.
like how you framed it too, because it's not on specific days. You can go in and just kind of learn what you want to learn and then go back to it
Mm.
if you want to learn more and take it at your own pace.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, unlike most summits where there's a weekend and it's this big
Hmm.
build up to that, we decided to make it free.
Hmm.
So our sponsors are actually paying for the marketing so that we can bring
Hmm.
awareness to it. So we're not charging our customers for that or our viewers. And the other thing is that it will be available all the time. There's no fake velvet rope. You can only get into this time, and you have to pay afterward. We're not playing that game. So we really
Yeah.
want to get the information out there, and make this be a more common conversation.
Hmm.
And then we will continue to update that. And so we'll do another version of it next year. We'll bring in some new speakers, some new subjects,
Hmm.
maybe get rid of some of the old, update some things. So I think this is going to be an evergreen thing for us.
Yeah.
And just continue to refine it and improve it. And eventually, I think we'll end up with an in-person event because
Hmm.
we want to bring the consumers, the doctors, and the industry professionals all under one roof so that
Hmm.
they can all hear the same thing and then,
Hmm.
move forward in some solidarity.
Well, and then you also mentioned you're starting your YouTube channel. So
Yes.
what kind of content's going to be on that?
All the summit will live there as
Hmm.
well. And then I also have a vast treasure trove of sort of Q&A that's emerging. So we just began building that out. And so you can go
Hmm.
to YouTube, GotMold USA,
Hmm.
and you'll see that some of the summit talks have moved over. But for the summit, you want to go to gotmoldsummit.com. That stuff will eventually move over. The other thing that you might want to take a look at is we have an ebook,
Hmm.
and I'll drop it in the chat for you here, so you can put
Okay.
that in the show notes. This is probably the most underrated thing that we do, because this is 45 pages of actionable tips, facts, wisdom, if you will. And as well, it also has a checklists that you can follow
Hmm.
if you want to do your own inspection. It has a lot of the do's and don'ts and FAQs and how to find a professional, those kinds of things.
Hmm.
So this is a really great place for people to get started. I would actually direct people here potentially even before the summit, believe it or not.
Okay, well, great. I
Um,
mean, that's a good thing that they could just look and it could be a resource for them to give to their clients, right? Is the consumer the person who's reading that ebook?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
This is a
great.
this is a great tool, and we get a lot of really positive feedback
Can
about
agents
that.
use your ebook as their lead magnet if they want to?
Yeah, we could probably work something out. There's no
Yeah.
doubt.
I mean,
Yep,
because it's such great information and they could just, then they're directing them to you too, but showing that they have extra knowledge in this area.
absolutely. Yep. Um, and then, we post, fairly frequently on Instagram.
Hmm.
We'll be posting all those summit updates, and that's,
What's
we're
your
at
Instagram handle?
GotMold.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you had mentioned that you have a resource to how to hire a mold remediator. Is that in that ebook or is that something different?
I will double check on that, and I'll make sure that if it's not in there, I will send you the article separately.
Okay, awesome. And then your regular website is just gotmold.com.
Gotmold.com, and that's where we sell the Gotmold test kit, uh, where you can get a kit that allows you to test 1, 2, or 3 rooms,
Mm-hmm.
uh, using the same devices that professionals use, using spore traps and
Mm-hmm.
our air sampling pump. And then once you've used our kit, you keep the air sampling pump, and you can buy refills. You can retest again for less. And so, it's our way of being able to sort of give you a cost-effective first step in the safety and comfort of your own home without having to get permission from anybody to do so.
Yeah, because you saw a gap in the marketplace, right? That's why you created that. And so what was the problem people were having?
Well, I got started in this space many moons ago, and we pioneered the use of mold sniffing dogs, which
Mm-hmm.
was both very effective and also a lot of fun. And so we ended up with this groundswell of attention. Seemingly every reporter in the country wanted to interview my dog. Uh, I came along for the ride, and so we ended up with all this national attention and national press, and from that we had an onslaught of calls from people all over the country that we couldn't service. And
Mm-hmm.
so invariably they would ask us, if there was a test kit we could recommend.
Mm.
And so I looked high and low and couldn't find anything that was even close to acceptable. And by the way, right around that same time, Consumer Reports did a similar sort of deep dive and found also that there was nothing that they could recommend. So we took
Mm.
the Consumer Report study and our observations and reverse engineered all the problems that we found in those kits, partnered with the number one lab in the country, Eurofins. At the time, it was MLab P&K, and now it's the number one lab in the world, Eurofins. Partnered with them to create the GotMold test kit. And so we really engineered all the shortcomings out of the
Mm-hmm.
other kits. And the idea was really to create a cost-effective first step, to create a way to democratize access to high quality lab data is probably
Mm-hmm.
the best way to say it. Um, and Yeah, and so far so good. We launched 2.5 years ago, and we, if you go on to Amazon or go to our website, you'll see that people really like it. We got like 4.7 stars across the board. So
Yay, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
it's been a fun journey, and it's not a replacement for a professional. Let me make this
Mm-hmm.
clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a pregnancy test kit in the sense
Okay.
that you don't start buying baby furniture because it's positive. You go to the doctor, right?
Right,
So
right.
we encourage people to use the same kind of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is the same kind of test that a professional is going to use when they come to your house. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not wasting money by doing that first. In fact, you can often determine whether or not you need to take some action quickly. And that's really our goal, is to give people the ability to take to do this safely. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, emotionally safely as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not inviting someone into your home that may use the data against you, and
Mm-hmm.
then to then use that information to maybe get your husband or wife on board, or maybe your boss or landlord, so that you can validate your concerns without breaking the bank. Our
Mm-hmm.
kits start at 199, they go up to 299, and that includes
Mm-hmm.
all lab fees and shipping. There's no surprises. So, if you're concerned about mold in your home, just about anybody can make that work.
Wow, I love it. Thank you for all the work that you do and all the wonderful conversation we've had. I'm so excited for just people to learn more about mold and not be so scared of it and just know what to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned something that will inspire you to think about your branding and how you can market yourself a little differently. If you enjoyed this episode, then you're going to love what I have for you, because you don't need to wait to go get extra certifications or grow or expand your network to get started attracting new leads right now. You can simply begin by talking about wellness real estate trends and what you've learned on this podcast with others. I mean, this is an interesting topic that no one has heard about, and I have all the tools that can make it even easier for you. Wellness Real Estate Magazine is a brand new wellness lifestyle magazine, and it's the only magazine that brings health and home together. We educate readers on industry trends and how you can create a healthier home environment. Written by industry experts around the country, and we have 3 covers to choose from: Wellness RE, Healthy Home, and Wellness at Home. So you can easily find one that aligns with your unique brand and messaging. These magazines are the perfect done-for-you tools that help you not only stay top of mind, but help you be memorable. They also educate and engage your audience, which positions you as an industry expert. So differentiate yourself and grow your brand the easy way. Learn more at healthyhomemedia.com.